If you see anything on the news about dogs, findings from studies on dogs and MRI machines, um, any fMRI studies on dogs, do not pay attention to it. It's junk science. It's garbage, and I'll explain why. And it's actually very easy to figure out why, just as a layman, if you think about it critically. If you just take a second and think about it, there are enormous methodological flaws in the studies. And what might that be? If you take a second and you think, all right, well, what types of dogs might be able to sit in an MRI machine calmly? What kinds of dogs might be able to do that? It takes months of conditioning. It's very similar, by the way, to how you muzzle condition a dog. You just keep feeding them treats in an area where they're supposed to kind of sit still, develop this positive association with the machine. It's the same thing as muzzle conditioning, right? Except it's harder. So even with that, it's an incredibly difficult task, right? It's not easy for a dog. It's not easy for a person to sit still in an MRI machine. How hard do you think it is for the average dog? It's impossible. It's impossible, okay? The only types of dogs that can do that are anomalies. It's very simple. They're basically like seeing eye dogs. Now, I had read Brian, they got one of the pioneers of the whole fMRI scan study bullshit is this guy Brian Hare. I read one of his books. I think it's called The Genius of Dogs. It was somewhat entertaining. Wasn't terrible. I wouldn't tell you not to read it, but I wouldn't read it with any high expectations. Certainly nothing paradigm shifting about the book. So, I want to say I think he's kind of fraudulent, because I've looked into some of his stuff, and the way he conducts a lot of his research it's so methodologically flawed that if it was being conducted on human beings, he'd just get laughed right out of the building. It would never pass peer review. I have no idea why it's okay, for instance, conduct studies based solely upon self-reporting by a third party, obviously, because the dog can't talk. Zero objective criteria, and that's what you're going to use to gauge a particular variable. Something that you're trying to measure. It's nonsense. It would never get accepted if we were trying to do that with human beings. But with dogs, it's just like how the FDA doesn't regulate kibble, but they regulate sort of human food. I guess the standards are just lower with dogs for some reason. Wouldn't work in primatology either, so I don't know why it's like that with dogs. I have an inkling, and I think it has to do with this, because fur babies are cash cows. So the more you can just turn it into a marketing scheme, the more money you can make. Now, I don't think Brian here is motivated solely by financial ambition or whatever like that, but I think he's successfully made a name for himself doing some pretty shoddy, not especially rigorous research, if you want to call it that. So, anyway, I had read about the MRI studies in Brian Hare's book, The Genius of Dogs, and I thought nothing of it. I was just like, yeah, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then I was watching on YouTube today. I saw a clip about these studies that are being conducted, and it immediately clicked for me. I was just like, oh, this is bullshit. And it showed like this, of course it was a lab, in a yellow lab, and things just like this, like dead in the machine, just like lobotomized. Because, God, I love labs too. I'm not shitting on them, but they're mostly very, very calm dogs, the yellow ones. That's why they make great seeing eye dogs, service dogs. So, and they're like, well, only certain dogs can do this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no shit, really? Like, try putting Dewey in one of those things. So what they're doing is they're taking this anomalous subsection of the dog population, and they're doing these magnetic resonance imaging studies, and they're going to generalize about the entire population of dogs based upon these outliers. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely insane, and this is emblematic of how scientific research is done on dogs in general. And again, you don't see this kind of bullshit in primatology, but I think it has a lot to do with marketing. So be wary of, if you read the newspaper, fMRI studies have yielded this fascinating thing about dogs dream. It's very similar to like if you took a bunch of you did a study on prisoners, right? Many of whom, I think it's like 20% of the prison population has antisocial personality disorder, sociopaths, and you did a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan study on a prison population, right? And then you tried to make a generalization about human beings or maybe Americans or whatever. It's ridiculous. Or it would be like taking, like they've done fMRI studies on monks, Buddhist monks, and they were like, oh, isn't that amazing? But they were looking at anomalies in isolation as outliers. Aren't they amazing, right? Yeah, they were pretty amazing, but what they didn't do was form generalizations about the human population based upon, these freaks in the fucking Himalayas. So that's what they're doing with these stupid studies, and it's outrageous. Only a very special kind of dog can fit, or can be calm enough to sit still in an MRI machine long enough to get an MRI done. I mean, I'm a spaz, and I've had MRIs, and I've had to restart it before because I started talking to myself, or God knows what I did. So anyway, don't pay attention to that bullshit, and remember, this is how it works. And in the dog industry, it's just whether the research is being conducted is intentionally geared toward taking your money or not, it will be used cynically by people like that, especially the positive reinforcement only nutcases. Like, see, it's the study said that dogs treats better than they like the word no. They'll take some bullshit, earth-shattering finding and now project it inappropriately onto the entire dog population. So be very, very wary of these studies, and always, maintain critical thinking. I mean, otherwise you're just going to be taken advantage of, especially with your dog, because people love their dogs, but they also humanize them, and it's very easy to manipulate people if you're unscrupulous when it comes to their dogs. So be wary of not really thinking too critically when it comes to this stuff.